Hello and welcome to MySecurity TV, and my name is Chris Cubbage. I'm with MySecurity Media. This is our Tech and Sec Weekly, our Tuesday afternoon episode, and we're going to be joined by Doug Wolfson, the Director of Financial Crime Compliance with LexisNexis Risk Solutions. He's based in Hong Kong. We're going to be looking at using AI and machine learning to combat animal trafficking. In our pre-interview discussion, it's quite a sad state of affairs, the state of animal trafficking. So we'll have a look at how advanced technology look at this particular crime type and a significant issue. Then we're going to be crossing over to Israel and be joined by Daniel Ehrenreich, who is our ICS cybersecurity expert, and we're doing some SCADA and ICS cybersecurity workshops with Daniel at the moment. And on Sunday, a cyber attack was announced on the Natanz atomic facility in Iran. So we thought it was a good opportunity to have a look at that particular set of circumstances. Israel has claimed responsibility, as I understand it. So we'll have a look at that and some other similar related attacks on critical infrastructure and the cyber threat landscape that we have in that context. We cover on aerospace and space, defence and national security, cybersecurity and critical technology, and cities and infrastructure. We should be streaming on YouTube, Facebook, and on LinkedIn. We have about 4 Facebook channels. The main one is the Asia Pacific Security Magazine. And then we also release some of the episodes out on our Cybersecurity Weekly podcast. We will go for at least 45 to 60 minutes. And if you have any questions or you want to get involved in the discussion, you are welcome to say g'day. And also let us know where you're listening from anywhere in the world. As we said, I'm in Sydney, we're crossing to Hong Kong and also to Israel. So quite an international flavour today. Just before we start, let me just check our streams if we can. And yeah, looks like we're going okay today. And I don't know whether we're on LinkedIn today. For some reason, we seem to be having an issue with LinkedIn. If you happen to be listening on LinkedIn, let us know. And otherwise, I'll sort that out. I did reset it today. Okay, we'll keep going. So as a lineup for Friday, we stream on Tuesdays and on Fridays, Tuesday afternoons and Friday mornings. So this Friday morning, we're sticking with the SCADA lineup, actually, and Mitsubishi Electric has updated their system with the Iconics. So we're going to be joined by Dr. Habib Rehman, who is the Director Asia Pacific with Iconics. And just one second, we've got a few others that are tuned in. And I take it that's the PR side of things. Is that right, Doug? Can you nod if you understand who they are? Otherwise, for those others that are signed in, you can sign out and watch the YouTube channel, but I won't be bringing you on. But anyway, tune in. Someone shared the link out. All right, we'll keep going. This is an odd one today. I'll catch up from Friday. We were joined by Itay Moa from Boston, and we looked at IoT security and 5 new ways that criminals avoid endpoint detection. We looked at Shodan and Canalys, I think, was the other one that we looked at in terms of how you can detect vulnerable systems. So very interesting with Itay of Kato Networks. And then we crossed back here to Sydney and spoke to Chris Althus, the Chief Executive Officer with the Australian Mobile Telecommunications Association, or AMTAR, and looked at the 5G and why 5G matters. And again, a very interesting discussion with Chris. We're into our second week of our SCADA and ICS cybersecurity courses, as I mentioned with Daniel. But if you want to join in, you can catch up with the recorded sessions and then start to join our twice weekly live sessions. We are still promoting our top women in security ASEAN region. This doesn't close until the 30th of May. So if you know women in the ASEAN region in the security domain, please nominate them or encourage them to nominate. And Jane Lowe's last podcast, Deepfake, Seeing is Believing. And I've also released the Secure Board, the interview with Claire Pales, and Anna Lebel is also out as a podcast now. You can grab our copy of the Cyber Risk Leaders magazine from the marketplace. And thank you to our sponsors, RSA Secure ID Suite with RSA. And then we've also got ALC cybersecurity certification courses, so please check them out. And you can also support the channel by looking at our merchandise in the Cyber War series. So that's enough from me, and let's get into this very fascinating domain of animal trafficking and trying to sort of use advanced technology and AI and machine learning to combat this issue. We're joined by Doug Wolfson, the Director of Financial Crime Compliance with LexisNexis Risk Solutions. Doug, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a really important subject that I think from time to time ends up getting overlooked, so I'm always happy to talk about it.
Look, absolutely, and I still haven't been able to put my finger on it. Our Sarosh Bana, our Mumbai correspondent, did a very interesting piece a few years ago on India and the Indian sort of illegal wildlife trade as well. But I think that was back in 2014. I'm sure we've covered it since, but it's as we're saying, it's a crime type. It's obviously linked to other crime and organised crime syndicates, but it does stand out on its own. It's some sort of, maybe Doug, introduce yourself in terms of your role. You're there in Hong Kong with LexisNexis Risk Solutions, and maybe introduce where your company is involved in this and some of the services that you're providing.
Sure, thank you. So my role, I've been here in Asia Pacific. I've been in Hong Kong now for over 14 years in various risk roles, both in banks. I actually spent a bit of time in a cybersecurity company as well, completely unrelated to all this, but touching on what you talk about. And now here with LexisNexis Risk Solutions for nearly 3 years. And my role here is really to understand the financial crime compliance marketplace, to understand the community that's working to combat it, be it on the bank side, on the corporate side, within all the various different facets of it, to be the subject matter expert on it for LexisNexis Solutions in the region, and to, in a lot of ways proselytize about what we as a community are trying to do and speak about it, to try and get the word out about, how we can stop financial crimes, how we can all work together to really reduce a lot of the risk, the financial risk that's created from it, terrorism risk that's created from it, drug risk that's created from it, and even sort of zoonotic disease risk as we're sort of going through right now. It's something that's taking front stage,
Well, look, some of the figures I've got is the annual value of animal trafficking is between 69 billion to 199 billion, and it's often an acts as a feeder crime for criminal rings and corrupt government officials. Maybe just talk, maybe hit straight back onto the AI and machine learning. What type of differences would animal trafficking have from, say, drug trafficking and even, human slavery and human trafficking? How kind of different is it? What are some of those red flags and indicators that you might be looking for?
Yeah, so what's interesting about it is that in itself, wildlife trafficking is not hugely different as a concept than human trafficking or drug trafficking. You're trying to get one thing from one place to another place without people recognizing that that's the thing you're moving. You're either talking about moving something else that is legal to move from place A to place B, or you're disguising it in some way, or you're sort of making it completely disappear and make it seem like it was never moved at all. And so in that respect, it is, it isn't different from drug trafficking or human trafficking. Where it's similar to human trafficking, but different from drug trafficking, is that these are oftentimes living beings in terms of animals. Now, if you're talking about ivory, obviously a product from an animal that's unfortunately been killed. But if you're talking about something like pangolins, live pangolins or other animals that are pets, snow leopards, tigers, things like this, then oftentimes they're alive. And so in that way, they need to be transported in a way in which they can be kept alive during the time that they're moved, which is somewhat similar to human trafficking, obviously done in different ways. You really can't stick people on a cargo ship and move them around the world in that way. But the problem is that these transactions end up getting lost as a single transaction or a small number of transactions within a very large number of legitimate transactions that are happening. And this is the same thing with human trafficking and the drug trade. And so what needs to be done is really, you're not even looking for a needle in a haystack, if you will. The best way I've heard it described is you're looking for a very specific needle inside a pile of needles.
All right.
And so it's finding that one transaction that doesn't seem to fit. And the ways that you start to do that is to look for transactions that don't make sense. A lot of times this comes down to really common sense. And so you're looking for a product that's transported from place A to place B that you wouldn't normally expect to be transported from place A to place B. So, let's say you're trying to disguise a wildlife shipment as something else, as a different type of, say it's a type of wood that you're transporting from, say, Africa to India or to Hong Kong or to China. It's trying to disguise it as a different type of wood that you normally wouldn't see either starting from place A or received by place B. It's those sort of transactions, and that's really where machine learning and artificial intelligence starts to come into play, is to look at all the transactions, all the shipping transactions, all the cargo transactions that are happening between those places, and starting to understand which ones don't fit the normal bill of behavior for that shipping route.
What's the key motivation from the banking perspective for this service? I take it they engage your company to do this. Is it a compliance driven, or is it also linked to the corporate responsibility that they have? What do you find is the main driver for this? Because it's sort of the backup question to that is, what type of resources are going into this? It's not really on the radar of sort of law enforcement. They've got so many other things that they sort of combat. It tends to fall into the customs and regulation, sort of the border controls, rather than law enforcement targeting organised crime. Where do you see the key driver is to detect this?
Well, taking your second question first, if you don't mind, it's definitely starting to become a bigger and bigger issue at the forefront of banks' minds, and not just because of compliance reasons, but because of sort of corporate social responsibility reasons. The E in ESG stands for environment, and so I think companies are starting to take that a lot more seriously, because we as consumers are starting to take that more seriously, and especially sort of the millennial generation, this is something that they care about. I think every generation cares about social issues a bit more than the generation before it, I think is maybe a fair thing to say. And so, they care about things like this. And so as we start to see that, the money transfer into their responsibility, into their hands, this starts to become a bigger and bigger issue. And so that, combined with the fact that governments and regulators are starting to look more and more closely at this, are starting to pass laws about responsibility in stopping wildlife trafficking. Companies, banks are starting to take it a bit more seriously, and so we see them starting to deploy these solutions in terms of where they're doing trade finance, because obviously they're not just tracking all ships just to track ships. They're tracking, they're tracking the trade that they're financing. They are required by their regulators to do screening for financial crime, which includes wildlife trafficking. And so, they are starting to look at this more closely and trying to see where they can help. I think it's more than just, I have to do this, so I'm going to do this. I think we've moved past those days of just sort of doing the bare minimum to get by without a fine.
Yep. What type of activity or methodology do you find that they're using? Are they now using a sort of the Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies as well now? And we have had some recent episodes looking at the sort of the dark net and cryptocurrency money laundering. So I'd imagine the answer is yes. And I suppose, how much are they using the dark net and cryptocurrencies in this?
Well, if the number I think you gave out was 69 billion to 199 billion. So if we start with that as sort of, right, that is, you couldn't have a bigger range if you had said billion to infinity, right? I mean, it's such a big range already. It's almost meaningless, right? And so to try to find in that space what amount is being laundered through cryptocurrency is even more difficult, right? And these are the problems that we're trying to solve: is how much is being laundered, how is it being laundered, what is the size? And then once you start to figure out these problems, then once you understand the problem, then you can solve the problem. I think what's really interesting about cryptocurrency as a money laundering tool, and this is something that we talk about a lot in webinars, we talk a lot about with journalists to help them understand the space, is that people think it's anonymous. It's not anonymous. It's pseudonymous, which as you know, it's anonymous until somebody can connect your wallet to your name. And FATF is requiring more and more regulators, as part of their mutual evaluations and the recent interpretive notes on recommendation 15, recommendation 16, that KYC and client due diligence information is collected by cryptocurrency exchanges, by people who are dealing in cryptocurrency, to make sure that these tools cannot be used as money laundering tools. And what is really interesting about it is, if you can connect a criminal's physical identity, who they are as a person, that they're a criminal. If you can connect to their cryptocurrency wallet, you now know their entire Bitcoin history, their entire Ethereum history, because it's stored in the blockchain. And so right now, it's a decent tool for laundering money. But I think as these FATF requirements start to be implemented by regulators around the globe, that will become less and less so. And I think historical criminal activity might start to be found out as well, when you can start to connect the actual person to those accounts. Now, there is, and I apologize, it's a bit of a long answer, but there is the question of obviously you have to be worried about the weakest link in the chain. Criminals are always looking for the lowest common denominator, the easiest place for them to do business. And so they're going to go to regulatory environments where cryptocurrency hasn't been regulated to that extent, where they've included KYC and CDD and payment tracking and transaction tracking and all of these things. They're going to go to those environments first, and hopefully over time, those FATF will continue to highlight these in their mutual evaluations, and regulators will start to build in these safeguards against them.
Well, unfortunately, it's probably those jurisdictions that don't have those controls are also part of the ones that are vulnerable to animal trafficking, and obviously the developing nations as well. And I noticed the ASEAN Wildlife Enforcement Network has been set up here I've got an infographic from LexisNexis Risk Solutions. So yeah, it's an interesting one for Southeast Asia is obviously one, and obviously the African continent is another sort of key domain where, I think again it was the article from Surash that the rhino will be extinct within by 2025 or 2030, this decade. And as we mentioned in our pre-interview, the less there are, the more valuable they become, which means they're more likely to be subject to poaching. And that's a big industry on its own right as well. What type of sort of ecosystem is developing around this? And maybe it does link back to human trafficking and the slavery. Do you find that they are coming together or connected, or do you find that they are quite distinct in terms of their trade?
So I think historically there has been a real focus on drug trafficking and on human trafficking, somewhat at the expense of wildlife trafficking. And what has been interesting to see over sort of the past 3 to 5 years is that real focus on wildlife trafficking as well. And so what we've seen is public-private partnerships, along with NGOs that are all working together to try to solve this. So there are NGOs that we work with that also work with the banks, that also work with companies, that are also working with the governments to try to come together to figure out how collectively we can solve this problem. Because you're right, it's seen as an Africa problem or as a Southeast Asia problem, but really it's a global problem. I mean, if you look at, not to say that COVID-19 has happened because of animal trafficking, but zoonotic diseases do happen because of it. The next pandemic could happen because of it. And so it's a global problem. There's no question about that, that this is an issue that affects everybody. And so it's important that we all work together to solve it. I think there are essentially three main parts that create an environment for wildlife trafficking. And it's a developing economy or an underdeveloped economy. It is a willingness by government officials to look the other way, to maybe they're not being paid enough so the bribes supplement income. Then obviously you need the raw materials. You need the animals and the flora and the fauna that are valuable to be transported. And it's really in Southeast Asia, in Africa, where you have those three factors sort of coalescing, if you will, that you have the flora and the fauna there. The people who are, you mentioned ivory, rhinos, elephants, people who are poaching rhinos and elephants, the people who are actually doing the poaching generally are not part of grand criminal enterprises. They're people who are poor, who need to find a way to make money, and this is the fastest, easiest way to make money for them. And so it's that's the reason why they're doing it. So you have that factor, you have the goods that need to be trafficked, and then you have government officials who are willing to look the other way for something in return in order for it to be able to get out of the country through sort of customs officials and government officials and things like that.
So it does sound like a lot needs to be done at that local end as well, a bit like what we saw with piracy in Somalia, where the pirates, that was their way of surviving. You're going to put these big cargo ships passing through our fishing waters. We're going to come and take you. Give us another part. So there was a lot of work done locally to give them a more local economy, and that sounds like something that needs to be done at the source. Rather than just detecting it. It's always too late by the time you're detecting the trafficking side, because it's already occurred, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing more devastating than just seeing a pile of elephant tusks to be destroyed. I mean, whatever the number of tusks is divided by 2, that's the number of elephants that had for that pile to be created. It's completely unnecessary. But just to sort of give you one more example of how all of trafficking sort of coalesces, right? If you think about one of the main ways in which people are trafficked and then enslaved is on fishing boats, right? And this is in Southeast Asia. And if you think about the fact if a fishing boat captain is willing to have someone who's been kidnapped put onto their boat and then essentially enslave them on that boat for 2, 3, 4 years and get slave labor out of them, do you think they really care about the environment or the fishing or whether they're overfishing or any of these issues? And then if they have the opportunity to transport drugs from one place to another place, because fishing boats do pass a lot more freely than other types of boats, they're going to do it. And so I think, there's a real need to solve all of these problems together, which is, part of what we're trying to do, rather than looking at it as distinct problems. I think syndicate. Oh, sorry.
No, I was going to say, finish that sentence because I think you're on the right track there. The criminal syndicate.
Yeah, a criminal syndicate is going to make money transporting whatever is the easiest thing to transport. And so whether it's drugs, people, wildlife, it's all the same criminal syndicate.
Yeah, and I think once you get to that scale that we're talking about, is people play their part within that syndicate. So, there's people doing the trafficking part. They get very good at the trafficking. They can get from A to B. they don't know they probably don't even know what they're trafficking most of the time. They just know they're going to get that package from here to there without being detected, or to circumvent normal detection, and that's their job. Whereas the others, both at the buyer and the seller end. Maybe just to finish off, and conscious of time, is the actual AI and machine learning being used, and I've got some here in terms of institutionalizing financial workflows around the red flags and risk indicators. Then you've got file suspicious activity reports to document trafficking risks, blacklist individuals or companies found to be participating in wildlife trafficking, conduct ongoing monitoring against current sanctions, and politically exposed person and adverse media intelligence, promote and participate in private-public partnerships. You've mentioned that. There's the United for Wildlife Financial Task Force, and make an ongoing commitment to play an active role in combating wildlife trafficking. I mean, it even happens here in Australia, particularly with our wildlife as well, particularly birds, reptiles, and the smaller animals as well. Maybe just talk us through, to finish off, the monitoring against sanctions and politically exposed persons and media intelligence. How much do you find is in that sort of game, and sort of the machine learning around that to raise red flags for those that are being monitored or doing the monitoring?
Absolutely. You know, if we take PEPs, right, politically exposed persons, these are, you know, politicians or people connected to politicians who have influence and can say, let cargo pass. If you're willing to take a bribe to allow somebody to do wildlife trafficking, you're willing to take a bribe to essentially do anything. I mean, it's pretty much the case, whether at that point you're just simply willing to take the money, or you can be coerced into taking it for considerably worse things. You know, it's very problematic. What we're looking at from our perspective is sort of a combination of digital and physical signals to understand how those people who are PEPs are behaving, right? If somebody that a bank knows is a PEP needs to give them a higher level of scrutiny than somebody who is not a PEP, for all of those reasons. And it's really about helping them understand, are they, you know, is the money that's passing through their account legitimate? Are they controlling accounts that they say they're not? So for instance, let's say that you opened an account, and I'm a politician in Australia, and you open an account, but then you give me the credentials and I run the account. You know, it's understanding, once you know that somebody's a PEP, how are they behaving in a way, does it make sense in a way that the bank would expect? Or are there red flags, are there criminal indicators in that behavior in itself? And so there's real concern about that. You know, in terms of the screening, it's really about understanding who the traffickers are. Anytime that they're reported in the media and it's verifiable and they're from strong sources, and this isn't you know, Facebook or Twitter or something like that, but they're in verifiable media sources, you know, adding them to databases to make sure that when their names are screened, it's clear that it's known that they've been connected to wildlife trafficking or any type of trafficking in the past. And then also just making sure that, you know, that the behavior that they're continuing to show makes sense versus, you know, versus what you're expecting from them. Again, it comes down to what you or I would call common sense, but in the computing world, that's what AI and machine learning is learning from the past and highlighting something that looks anomalous. Yeah. That's, you know, sort of a very technical way to describe common sense.
You brought up social media as well there, and even maybe back to the darknet. I take it there's often clubs, you know, they might even be legitimate sort of clubs that, you know, we talk about birds or reptiles, and, you know, they're sort of the club or keepers, or clubs for animal keepers and the like, and then they get sort of sucked into getting that rare bird or that rare species into their collection. Are the platforms involved in supporting this work as well? You know, platforms like Facebook, YouTube and the like to make sure that there is no sharing of what might be illicit animals?
So I do believe that most of the terms of service of those entities, and I'm not 100% sure, it's not actually something we've looked directly at, but is an interesting point. But I would believe that most of the terms of service of those platforms would include trafficked wildlife or endangered species as their, within their sort of illicit substances or illicit products that they would shut down if they saw it on there.
Yeah, it's something that I know that we've had the e-safety commissioner on, so they're doing it around sort of online bullying and that type of sort of sexual harassment and those types and violence. But it'd be interesting if they can start to add that on, because I imagine sort of sharing birds and reptile pictures within a collection, unless you know what you're looking for or some key words, might seem pretty harmless, but could be an indicator there that they're involved in some sort of illicit trade. So look, on that note, very interesting subject and a very important subject. So I'm very pleased that we were able to cover that. And I thank you to LexisNexis Risk Solutions. Now, before on the LexisNexis, I don't think we've covered LexisNexis before. What's the background of LexisNexis? Because it's one of those words from an Australian perspective. I know you do some really interesting work, and it's part of a larger sort of network. What's the background of the company?
So we are actually part of a group, is our parent company, which is listed in the UK, the US, and the Netherlands, and our primary listing in the UK, which owns a lot of subsidiaries, and we're very much in the data fields, but also in publishing. We publish a number of medical journals and scientific journals out of a subsidiary called Elsevier. There's our we've recently combined with another subsidiary within RELX called Acuity, who is also in this business. We have LexisNexis Legal and which is a separate affiliate which focuses on law and court cases and regulatory compliance. We have flight data. If you go online and look up when we can all fly again, look up flight data. We collect and distribute a lot of that data, oil and gas data, and also I don't know if you know Comic-Con. We used to be able to gather in groups as well. There's a subsidiary called Reed Exhibitions that actually runs Comic-Con.
Got it.
We're part of a bigger puzzle. We're a piece of the bigger puzzle. But what's great is it allows us to work with all of these different entities, be it LexisNexis Legal and Professional, on regulatory compliance and how financial crime compliance and regulatory compliance come together, or Cerium and airlines and how potentially trafficking or screening for people on airlines. A lot of that is work that we can do together, which is great to have within one entity. So
it becomes a data science play as well at a bigger level. So, look, very interesting. We have covered LexisNexis before on our channels, and as well as most of us will know Elsevier and Reed Exhibitions as well. So, very good. I'm glad you sort of reminded me of that. I think it's our first time having you on MySecTV, so thank you very much for your time. So that was Doug Wolfson, the Director Financial Crime Compliance with LexisNexis Risk Solutions there in Hong Kong. Doug, stay safe over there, and thank you very much for joining us on MySecurityTV.
Thank you very much for having me. It's
good, man.
been speaking with you about it. Thank you.
Good on you. Have a good day. I'll let you go. Thanks, Doug.
You too. Bye.
Okay, very, very interesting, and a bit sad that we even have to talk about it, but that's crime for you. Now, next up, we've got Daniel Ehrenreich. Let me just get my slides sorted so I bring up the right one. And what a shame, we're not on LinkedIn today for some reason. That's 2 days in a row So either I've upset LinkedIn or they're going to ban me for whatever reason. But if you are listening, let us know, and from where you're listening from. I imagine you'll be on either Facebook or on YouTube. But now I'm going to bring on Daniel Ehrenreich. Now, we had a slight mic issue before. Daniel, how are you going there?
Yes, good afternoon.
Beautiful. And good morning to you there in Israel. I'm glad we've got you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Following to the introduction and the topics which are on the news, I would like to give a couple of things that we can all learn from that. So let me try to open my short session about couple of incidents which happened recently worldwide related to industrial plants. We call it cyber physical. And as you mentioned, we are hearing about the attack on the Natanz facility, although no one really clearly say what exactly happened there. Was it a cyber attack or another attack? But definitely, I will give some ideas about this topic. We heard
just
about
before you start, Daniel. Was I correct in saying that Israel they haven't come out and claim responsibility, but they're not denying it? What's the circumstances there at the moment? Because it's been pretty well covered in Israeli media.
You know what? When things happen in this part of the world, I think everyone is very much sure about who did it, why did it, and where did it. I'm not sure if there is a clear announcement. As usually, there is no announcement. We all know there are a couple of events among countries in this part of the world, but I say. It is quietly handled. Usually, no one is interested to making a big issue about it. Although things are done and it's all on the news.
Yeah.
So earlier there was an attack on a vessel, which was a fishing vessel, according to publication, modified to military vessel. We heard about other attacks in other parts of the world which are not related to this one, like the attack on the Oldsmar water utility, which could be a severe incident, a luckily it didn't happen. Last year there was an attack on a water utility in Israel by known countries. So, but what is really bothering us is the publication of Bridewell Consulting that in the past year 86% of critical national infrastructures in UK have experienced some type of cyber attack on the operational technology, industrial control systems. And this is something that needs to bother us, because what does it mean? It means that there is no specific spot around the world or a country or fight about two countries. It's happening all around the world. So just to give you a little bit of background about what we are talking about, when we speak about attacks, such as happened on the Natanz facility, which people say it was not a cyber attack, but according to what I show here, there are three possibilities. Internally generated attack. It can be any kind of mechanical damage. It can be attaching some type of explosive, as it was published. It can be an employee or a visitor or someone who penetrate internal to the facility. So it is all called cyber attack, no matter how exactly if it was done through computer or not. Externally generated attack is always through the internet, like what happened on the water utilities in USA and in Israel. It was done through the internet. By the way, the Stuxnet attack in 2010 was also an internally generated attack. And then we are talking about the solar supply chain related cyber attack, such as was the SolarWinds, which happened that people rely on the supplier, they download the update, and suddenly the malware is coming into the
You mentioned the
site.
Stuxnet. The Stuxnet was also on the Natanz facility as well,
Yes,
right?
yes. It was also an internally generated attack, although it was computer-related attack, meaning that there was probably a pre-designed attack. Somebody carried it on the malvertised computer or USB. It does not really matter what happened. And who did it. What really matters that in 2010 the industry realized that air-gapped facilities which are disconnected from the internet are not truly safe. This is the important conclusion from that attack. So it's not enough to say we are disconnected from the internet, because internally generated cyber attack might happen.
Understood.
So just briefly, who can be the attackers? Practically insiders, outsiders. The type of attack can be accidental, opportunistic, or targeted, focused. And when we speak about the big activities initiated by nations, then obviously we have professional attackers. In standard 62443, we define it under security level 4, when there are enough knowledge, enough budgets and time, and the bad news is that APT, advanced persistent threat attacks, will be successful. So how can we protect our organization? First of all, a very simple, the PPT triad means that we need to have trained people, we need to collect intelligence, we need to conduct forensics when something happened, to really investigate what happened, why it was not prevented. We need policies and preparedness, like I'm going to talk about it very soon, incident response measures, which should be part of the policy, part of the organization activity, and finally technologies. So you can see that if you are working in parallel and deploying cyber defense in these three vectors, people, policies, and technologies, I will never say you can prevent an attack, but you can make it significantly more difficult. Briefly talking about the three important activities that you can do. Incident response is obviously the most important, because you have teams, you have training, you have practicing, and it will be their role to instantly take action. When we speak about IT operation, obviously prevent data leakage, data encryption, exposure of confidential information. When we speak about industrial activity, we always refer to preventing outage, preventing damage, but I would say the most important, preventing that people might get hurt. So this is very, very critical. Then we need to have the business continuity preparedness. What are we doing as part of our activity? People, policies, and technologies. We have redundant computers. We have trained people. We do the training and drills. All these things can be done. And finally, disaster recovery planning, the DRP, need to be in every organization in order to return to the activity as quickly as possible. So, very clear. And I would say in these two slides, you see what the management can see immediately what can be done, and how can your organization achieve that? So
well, in this particular example, obviously their incident response needs to be pretty good, considering it's a nuclear facility, and they're obviously dealing with an advanced persistent threat. And even when they know they're under threat, they, as you said, when you're dealing with an APT, they are very likely to get through and be successful eventually. And this facility has been attacked before significantly. We talked about Stuxnet. Yes. So even they must be on. I think they're building it in the base of a mountain, and even still, they've had a successful attack against them. And it does show just how difficult it can be to protect when you've got that APT who is just targeting you non-stop, right?
Well, as I said, there is no silver bullet. And here we have an example, a facility which was already under attack, and somebody is making a decision to take an action, and it cannot be prevented, because either it will be internal, either it will be internal by employee, by a cleaning person, by a service provider. There are many possibilities that attack can take place, and today to carry a very small size a memory device on a USB, that it really can, no one can really prevent it, that someone will bring it to the facility. So to tell you that there is a possibility to prevent it, we always need to do our most in order to take action and prevent that. And when it happens, we need the forensic activity, and we need to do investigation, and we need to upgrade our preparedness. And this is what brings me to how can we do that? The standard 62443 is different from other regulations. It really tells you step by step how you can do it. And our current collaboration is conducting the 16-hour workshop. It started on 6th of April, but I really want to tell you it's not too late to join, because all the recordings, all the presentations are recorded and can be available. So what are we doing in this 16-hour session? First of all, most important, people who deal with industrial cybersecurity must understand how the industrial plants are working. Then we are talking about the different kind of vulnerabilities, the attack vectors, attack surface, how the IIoT device might increase the cyber attack surface and increase the risk. We talk about cyber defense methodology, how exactly we are defending the facility, meaning how exactly we can reduce the probability that a cyber attack will get through. We will talk about a couple of standards, but the entire session or majority of the session will be dedicated to the ISA 62443, the principles, the philosophy, the methodology. We will talk about what I mentioned earlier, the BCP, DRP, and IR, how we are doing it, what is the role of the different teams. Then we talk about the cyber secure maintenance. This is specifically important these days during the COVID-19 period, that we cannot, people cannot travel to the facility to conduct maintenance, and we have no choice. We must allow them to connect remotely. By the way, this was happened in Oldsmar, Florida, that they were very prepared to allow remote maintenance, and finally turned to a cyber attack. On the last session, we are going to look ahead. What next? What else we can do? Where the industry is going? So truly, I'm inviting you to consider this session, and for sure it will help you to improve the cybersecurity posture of your organization.
Wonderful. Thank you, Daniel. Very good sale there. So look, do join in if you can. There are a number of sessions. And obviously, given this attack in Iran on the weekend, we saw as a good example, or another example, sadly, of critical infrastructure and industrial control systems being attacked. And that one caused a massive blackout. And I was incorrect. I think I incorrectly said that Israel claimed responsibility. They have not claimed responsibility. Everyone's looking at Israel in the end anyway, given the situation. I got a quote here from Netanyahu, who said, I've lost it. He pretty much toasted his security team. So look, it does have the sort of similar vein of Stuxnet as it was in 2010. So here we are 11 years later, and the same facility is being attacked. But as Daniel Ehrenreich sort of passes through in his teachings, advanced persistent threats will be successful eventually. And so you really do have to know how to protect and defend against these on these critical systems. So look, Daniel, on that note, thank you so much. We're going to be doing session 4 this Thursday. So if you want to join in, that's 4 o'clock Australian Eastern Standard Time. Just let us know, and we'll get you onto that course. We do have a number of participants on that course as well, and they're getting into the meaty parts of it now, but you can always catch up. Sessions 1 to 3 are available, as Daniel pointed out. So Daniel, stay safe over there. Thank you very much for tuning in, and I'll see you again on Thursday afternoon.
Thank you very much, and looking forward to that all participants benefit from that training.
Absolutely. That's the course there. Just again, go to the MySecurity Marketplace. The course is available, and check out all the details there and run down on each of the 8 sessions. So Daniel, I'll let you go, mate, and I'll see you on Thursday.
Okay, perfect.
All the best. Ciao. Okay, so look, that's it from us today. And unfortunately, we're not tuning in on LinkedIn, so I'll check that out for later in the week. But if you happen to be listening on YouTube or on Facebook, say good day, and let's see if these chats are working. And as I do, the report of the day, and this is out. This is a Forrester consulting report, and it was commissioned by Elastic. And this is the changing role of the IT leader, driving business resilience through adaptability and employee experience, and really looking at the changing role of IT during COVID and remote working. So the 3 key takeaways, it's a pretty meaty report. It's worth having a look at if you're in this space, but it's more than 1/3 of IT leaders said their organization's IT budget decreased by more than 10% since the beginning of the pandemic. 57% of IT leaders believe that enabling employees to work flexibly and remotely will improve the adaptiveness of their organization. And more than 1 in 3 IT leaders said their organization is expanding enterprise collaboration technologies to enable employee productivity. So obviously the IT leaders under a scope of change during the pandemic and will continue to be. So that's it from us. Please check out the Cyber Risk Leaders magazine. There's some 20 articles in there, and otherwise support the channel with our Cyber War series. Thank you very much. We'll see you on Friday morning, where we're looking at SCADA, the Mitsubishi Electric SCADA lineup. And also, I can't tell you who we've got on Friday morning, but their announcement should be coming out tomorrow. And once that's out, we'll disclose who we've got. So that's 10 a.m. AST in Sydney time on Friday morning. And we'll see you then. Enjoy your day.